Hey Noah, thanks for coming on here and talking about what you're going to be presenting at the 2024 Chapel Grove Young Speakers Meeting. I have you down for two topics. The first one is what is male and female, which is really a talk about the transgender issue that's raging in our culture right now. And the other is what about recreational marijuana? I just want you to give us a little seed about your talk. What is male and female? Would you share with us something about that?
Sure. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me on and also thank the Chapel Grove congregation for hosting this meeting. It's an excellent theme and I think it will be a good blessing for the church. This topic here is certainly a very prevalent topic. It's relevant to our society, probably more than it's ever been in our culture. And so I kind of want to do a little bit of a backdrop, not just in our society, but kind of in a bigger picture, and go to Romans chapter 1, and we'll talk about really where this all stems from, because I think this question that's pretty prevalent in our society goes all the way back to it's really just a symptom of a much bigger problem. And Paul kind of outlines that in Romans chapter 1. He talks about how when people look at creation and they deny God the creator, then the natural result is always going to lead to this kind of thing, complete confusion. This morning I was driving home from a cow pasture and I saw painted bunting flying along right beside me, and I looked out there and you see that kind of thing and you can't help but think, who painted that bird? And not only who painted that bird, but how can that bird fly? I love the fascination of, like, when you think about drones and helicopters, airplanes, all of those things can fly and do all kinds of amazing things. Nobody in their right mind would think that that was not designed, and yet people claim that that bird was not designed, who is makes those drones look clumsy. And not only that, that bird can build a nest. It can sit on those eggs for a couple weeks, hatch those eggs, and then raise a whole family of birds, which is absolutely amazing. And when people look at that, they see this undeniable evidence of God's existence, and they deny that. As Paul says in Romans chapter 1, God's going to allow them to follow that irrational conclusion to its logical conclusion, which will result in utter confusion. And that's kind of the society in which we live, is a society that long ago denied God, and now we live in a society that is reaping the results of that decision. And so I think we'll do a little bit of that. We're not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about our specific society. We'll do a little bit of that. And then I think we want to do just like Jesus did, go back to the beginning. We'll look at God's design, his perfect blueprint of male and female. We'll mainly focus on making the affirmative case. And then later on, if we have time, we'll answer some objections to that affirmative case for the male and female of the Genesis account that God designed. And then we're going to also talk about sin's destruction, because that is the world in which we live is very much plagued by sin. So we'll talk about in Genesis chapter 3 that perfect. Genesis chapter 1, we have the perfect design. Genesis chapter 3, we see when that perfect design began to be marred, and we see how that happened. And I think as we look at how that occurred, we can get somewhat of a better idea for how that transpires every time, over and over throughout society. And I think it's especially relevant to the transgenderism question, as we see Eve followed her feelings rather than the facts, and it resulted in complete disaster, confusion, and misery. And that's what happens over and over throughout every time when people choose to follow their feelings as opposed to the word of God. And then, as with everything, but I think especially with this topic, we want to be we don't want to just point out the disaster in which we live, the world that has all of these problems that we face on an everyday basis. And we want to remember that the reason that we care so much about this is because these are people just like us who are created in the image of God. And so it's a very significant question. It's not just a debate, but this is about people, and we want it to not only point out the problem, but we want to point out the solution. And thankfully, not only is God the creator God, he is the redeemer God, and he provided a solution to all of our problems, and that certainly includes the problem of transgenderism. So we'll talk about that kind of at the end, and close hopefully talking about the solution that's provided in Jesus, and how people, even in terrible situations, even who have gone down this road of utter confusion, can find redemption, and they can find salvation, they can find hope, and they can find peace, something that the world can't provide anywhere.
Thanks, Noah. That was very well spoken. A good preview of what you got going for us. The other topic, again, will be what about recreational marijuana? We'll just tease any viewers with that title, and that'll also be something that's very relevant to our time. A pressing question lots of people will be interested in, I'm sure. So you're talking on Friday evening at 7 p.m., what is male and female, and Saturday evening at 6 p.m., what about recreational marijuana? You're from Oklahoma, coming all the way out to Tennessee. We're looking forward to having you. Thanks, Noah.